So to get you guys thinking about it, we are going to be going to a more traditional mountain dulcimer tuning DAA today, and everybody's muted. So while I'm going through these pages, if you want to start the process of getting that melody string down, while I'm talking about the strings here, and remember, you do want to take that melody string if you're tuned to DAD, with D being your melody string or your double melody string. You want to lower the pitch and not try to go up to A. You want to come down from D to go to A and match the tone of your middle string. So let's take a look at strings and tuning real quick. What you're going to find in a lot of mountain dulcimer string packs is what you're seeing there on the screen, which is 0.011, and that number refers to the size of the string gauge. And 0.011 is popularly used for the melody string course. And then you've got 0.013 for the middle string. And the larger those numbers get, the wider the circumference of the string, the wider around it is. And that's going to give you the opportunity to play lower notes that are lower in pitch. And the lower those numbers get, you're getting into the higher pitched notes. So we have 0.013 on the middle string and then 0.024 on the bass string. A lot of dulcimer manufacturers build their dulcimers with a certain string set and gauge in mind for it to sound good, the intonation, the ability to play on pitch correctly so everything sounds in tune. But you can also go back and forth and experiment with these different numbers to see what feels best to you. And I'm going to share you a little secret about this. Even though the string packs do exist, I really recommend bumping up the melody string and the middle string a little bit. And the reason being is, especially if you're playing in the jam, the higher pitched strings are a lot quieter than the other ones. And so if you're playing in the jam and you're having a hard time hearing yourself, that's probably one of the reasons. So I like to recommend that instead of buying the string sets, which is always, sometimes good if you're in a rush and just need to grab something, is you can buy strings in individual packs and you can mix and match and create your own feel. So I think a lot of people think that you have to buy a mountain dulcimer string set, but you can use just basic guitar strings. There's nothing different between guitar strings and mountain dulcimer strings, except for the gauges that are usually acceptable. And I like to bump that melody string up to at least a 0.012, if not a 0.013. It's still nice and loose so that it's not going to be slicing into your finger or anything, but it's going to give you just a little bit more volume, and it's going to give you a little more control to grow into. And so it's a good idea to kind of get used to it. Now, the melody string for a mountain dulcimer in DAD tuning is wound super tight. And the bass string is not terribly tight, but it's not terribly slack either. It's that middle string, though, that has the least amount of tension. And if you place your fingers down on the strings and you use the same pressure all the way across all of them, you're going to be pressing down the middle string a little bit more because there's less resistance. And for that reason, it's the middle string that sometimes goes out of tune because we push it down so much that we're actually sharpening the string. We're making it a little bit, it's pitched a little bit higher than it should be. And so if you find that, and you find that, gosh, no matter how much you try, you're still coming up with a sound that's a little out of tune, it might be that middle string. And so I like to get that middle string bumped up to a 0.014 at least, or a 0.015. That takes up the slack and makes the touch, the feel of the strings more uniform across. And also, yeah, who was that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I went to get my mountain dulcimer and I think I missed something. How do you know what the strings are, what number they are?
They'll be written on the package.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, and that's the thing too is, I get my strings from Fullcraft a lot, but you'll notice that in this picture, it says, at the very, very top on the Fullcraft label, it says 0.011, 0.013, dot, dot,
Oh,
dot. And then you pull them out though, but there's nothing on the strings themselves. It tells you what
okay.
they are. So yeah, that's another reason I like to get those strings individually, because there's no doubt if there's only one string in the pack and you bought a pack of 0.013, then there's no doubt that that is what you've got in the pack. It's kind of tough if you're not used to it to eyeball the string and go, yeah, that's a, you know. So that's another good reason to buy those strings individually. You can get them from your local music store. We call it a la carte. You buy them individually. Or you can also go to juststrings.com online and have them shipped to you. And as far as what type of string or what brand to buy, I like GHS. They're pretty dependable and they're good quality strings. And you can experiment with other types of strings as well. But GHS has always really worked well for me, and I believe that's what Fullcraft actually uses and packages up together. Any questions on string gauge? And to unmute yourself, all you have to do is press down on the space bar and talk, but you have to hold that space bar down in order to continue being heard.
What do you recommend for the bass string?
0.024 is actually very good. It's actually a very good solid, a solid gauge. If for whatever reason you wanted to bump that up a bit, remember, you know, the larger the number gets, the more thickness, and you can get some lower tones. So if you find that your sound is lacking in the bass department, you can bump that up to 0.026 is really good. I've even used a 0.028. Now here's the thing is, once again, the builder has probably built this with certain specification for strings in mind, and that includes the nut of the instrument and the bridge of the instrument. Real quick, let me go ahead and I'm going to stop sharing and come over to the overhead view. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to change this, and I might have to make an adjustment. So I'm frozen in the top right hand corner, but that's okay because the main thing here is to look at the dulcimer itself. So anatomy wise, the nut is right here at the end of the instrument, and then the bridge is on the other end of the instrument, and the strings pass through the nut and they attach to the tuners up here, and that's how you tune it. And then down here, the strings pass through the bridge, and then they connect at the bottom of the instrument on posts or pegs or what have you. Those slots that are cut there typically are cut for certain gauges. So you can get to a point where you can get a string that may be a little too big for that notch that's cut in the nut and the bridge. And what will happen is, instead of sitting down into the slot, it may raise up. It'll touch the sides of the slot and it won't go down all the way. This will raise the action, the level of, or the height of the strings above the fretboard, and that can cause discomfort when you're playing. It can cause buzzing, and it can hurt your fingers a little bit because the action's too high. So you want to be careful when you're experimenting with the strings to make sure they sit down in that nut and bridge. And often builders will, you know, if you send them a note, I know Fullcraft will do this, if you want to experiment with different string gauges but find the nut and bridge aren't cut properly, ask them to send you a replacement and let them know what gauge strings you're planning on using. And then they'll send you some blanks, and it's pretty easy to take the strings off, knock them out real quick, because they're not usually secured in there forever, because they do wear down. The more you tune, think of these strings sort of like a saw, and every time we move them a little bit, it's going to kind of start making its way down into the nut. Not so much the bridge, but definitely the nut. And that lowers the string action, and eventually you do have to have that nut replaced. So if you're getting a lot of buzzing on your instrument, chances are it's about time to replace the nut. And again, your builder will have blanks available and also can send you some new ones. You know, when we get into more intermediate and advanced sessions, I'll talk about how you can actually do that yourself. All right, I'm going to go ahead and come back to sharing the the screen. We're going back to AirPlay. And I'll go over here and hit screen mirroring. And here it comes. All right. Okay. So there's some visual, a nice close-up of the nut there on the left side of the screen, and then we've got our bass, middle, and melody. And then at the other end of the dulcimer, there in that right color picture, you can see the bridge. You can see the notches that are cut into the bridge, and then where it connects. And there are many different ways of connecting. And this is one thing I want to mention about buying your strings. It's important to get the right type, whether it's loop end or ball end. On the left side, you see loop end strings. So if you've got screws or big wooden posts or something that is not a little tiny post, then the loop end strings are going to be helpful because they will be big enough to go over the edge of whatever it is that you've got down there on the tail piece of the instrument. But if you've got these fun little posts that are just the right size to slip this ball over, then you'll want to get the ball end strings. Now the thing is you can use ball end strings on pegs for loop end as well. You just feed the end of the string without the ball, you feed it through the ball, you create yourself a little loop, and then put that loop over whatever it is you've got. So you can use ball end strings no matter what type of post you have on the instrument. But if you've got the posts, you're really going to want to use the ball end if you can. You can use the loop, but there's some space there, and if you're loosening strings and tightening strings, it's very easy for those loops to fall off of the posts, and that's just a big pain. You end up ruining strings by losing the tension, and then you have to wind them around again and all this stuff, so it can be kind of frustrating. So do take a look at the tail piece of your instrument down by the bridge and make a note of what you've got down there. And whatever's on there right now is working for you more than likely, so just make sure that you always are consistent with either buying the loop end strings or buying the ball end strings. All right. I'm going to get out of this page and go to page number 2. All right. And again, a lot of this stuff is just resource material. You guys have probably read through it already. But take a look at these tuners here. Very important to have the tuner. You can tune by ear, but this is going to make it a lot more consistent across the board, a lot easier for you. So you've got the tuners that you can just lay on your dulcimer, and it has a microphone in it, and you can pluck that string. And when the tuner lights up green in the middle, there's usually a needle that moves back and forth. That's going to give you, your tuning. Not all tuners are built the same. A lot of tuners aren't the greatest, and I will tell you that the snark, you can see that I don't have the snark pictured here. The snark is a cute little thing, and people love it to death, but it actually will allow you to be a little flat and a little sharp. Even though it tells you that you are straight on the money, you'll still be not quite in tune. So if you want to write this down, I recommend the Peterson Strobo Clip. The Peterson Strobo Clip. That's the tuner that I've been using for a number of years. Peterson makes these fabulous, fabulous tuners for tuning pianos, and it's a little, you have to kind of get used to working with it, and I'll show you mine here in a second. But it's going to give you the most accurate reading, and it's going to make you sound awesome and in tune all the time. That's Peterson Strobo Clip. And it's a wonderful thing, and it's built a lot more solid than the snarks. I know a lot of people buy them, and they have to buy 3 or 4 of them because those little claws keep breaking off, And the Petersons are built very, very strongly. Let's take a look at picks. There are a number of different ways to get sound out of your instrument, using picks, using your fingers.
I'm sorry, Bing, I have a question.
Oh, yeah.
Well, if you have to use your phone, is there a particular app that you like? Because sometimes I just have to use my phone because I can't find the dang tuner. So,
Right, right. Yes, and as a matter of fact, Peterson also makes a phone app. Um, and I'm trying to think of its name, but if you put Peterson Tuner into the App Store, you'll be able to find it. I don't know what it's going for right now. It's somewhere around $3 or $4, I think. Um, and it's an awesome tuner. You just put your phone near the instrument, and it'll give you that. Um, and I'll demonstrate it how it works. But the strobe effect, basically, you want to pluck the string so that the little bars stop moving. If the bars move, usually to the left, uh, that means that or if the bars move upwards, it means that you're sharp. And if the bars move downwards, it means that you're flat. You want them to kind of hover in the middle. They may not stand completely still, but once they get to the point where they're pretty steady, then you know you're in tune. And that really is the most accurate tuner that's on the market. So look up the Peterson app in your store. I know it's available for Apple phones. I'm pretty sure it's available for Android phones, but do take a look for that. It's awesome. I have not used any other tuners on the phone, so I'm sure there are others out there, but the technology in the Peterson is the same as in the clip-on tuners and also in their bench tuners, and it's the same great accuracy that you can get with those.
Hey, Bing, it's iStrobe Soft.
Strobosoft, that's right. Strobosoft. And it's great. The thing I also like about the Strobosoft is that you know how you get into a room, jam, and people are all tuning up, or maybe a workshop, and that makes your tuner go all over the place if you're using a microphone, if you're not clipped directly to the instrument. The Strobosoft app has a learn feature where you can literally hit a button and take an audio picture of the room, and then everything it hears, it immediately gets rid of so that you can tune in peace and not have all of this other stuff coming in to influence the tuner. That's a really, really awesome feature. All right, let's look at picks and strumming. So we can finger pick, we can use our fingers, but typically we're going to be using a pick to play. And I think one mistake that a lot of beginner players make is they use the softest pick they can for a couple of reasons. One, they don't want the strings to launch the pick into the sound hole, which happens more often than we care to admit. So using a softer pick means less resistance, and you can just kind of play through the strings. The problem with that is that we need to be able to feel the string when the pick contacts it. It's going to give us a registration that we've made that contact, and it's going to give us better control. If the pick is like, a cooked piece of spaghetti and it's just kind of bending back and forth, we're not going to get that same feeling of contact, and we're not going to have as much control. Also, a softer pick means a softer tone and a softer volume. So once again, if you're having trouble hearing yourself, it might be because the pick is too thin. Picks are measured in millimeters generally. Sometimes they just simply say soft, medium, and hard. But oftentimes they have a number on them in millimeters. And I would say go no softer than 0.80 millimeters. That's going to give you enough flex to where it's going to sound good, but it's also going to give you enough rigidity so that you've got control, and that's super important. Yes, it might take a little bit of getting used to if you're used to a softer pick, but once you do get used to it, you'll notice that your volume is a lot louder, your control's a lot better. And the key to this is to use as soft a grip as possible. Don't hold on to the pick too tightly, and we'll cover that here in just a second. Next thing here is as far as playing the notes. Our right hand strumming, our left hand will be playing the notes. Not for everybody. If you are a left-handed person, and I don't see a whole bunch of them, but I know that there are many of you out there who are left-handed, but because everybody plays the dulcimer this way, you follow suit. But if you've got your dominant hand doing non-dominant things, it can mess you up. In fact, our veterinarian plays dulcimer, and we were working on some stuff. He said, I'm just having the hardest time with this. And I said, well, and he said, well, I'm a left-handed, and that might be part of the problem. I said, really? I said, well, let's do this. Let's flip the nut and bridge around and turn the dulcimer the other direction. Well, don't you know that fixed all of the problems, and he began playing well again. So if you're a left-handed player, contact me, and I'll walk you through how to flip the nut and the bridge around and change the orientation of the strings and get that headstock pointing in the other direction to help you, because I think it'll be better for you than trying to force yourself to be a left-handed player in a right-handed world. But for right now, a lot of us are right-handed, so we're playing with our left hand to pick the notes. Here's the idea about that. You want to put your finger down just to the left of the fret, and those little metal bits all up and down the fretboard. And you put your finger right down to the left of it, and what you want to do is you want to pluck until you get a nice tone. So if you don't press down hard enough, you'll get that sound, you know. And then if you press down just a little more, it sounds more like a note, but there's kind of a buzz to it. So you want to keep pressing down until you get a nice clean tone. You don't want to push down too hard because you can actually stretch that string out more than it should, and you will actually go sharp. You'll go a little higher pitch than you really should. And that it's uncomfortable. You want to have a nice light touch when you're moving around on the fretboard. So to the left of the fret is where we want to put our fingers for
Excuse me.
that. Yeah.
About the picks, the .80, where's that information?
It's not on all picks. Some of them will just have, some of them won't have anything on it.
Okay.
Some of them will just have a word. But when you first buy the picks from a music store or something like that, that information should be available, whether it be online or for somebody. A good number of them, like the Dunlop picks, have that embossed right there on the pick itself.
Okay.
But you know, you might have been given a pick by somebody and all that information got rubbed off. It was printed as opposed to embossed or something like that. Here's the clue. If you can bend your pick easily, it's too thin. You don't want it to be able to fold, you know, or flap. And that also, a weak pick will give you a lot of flapping noise, and that's no fun. So you want something that's got a little flex to it, but not too much. Not too much. Take a look at the bottom of the screen and you'll see a representation of the fretboard. Most dulcimers of a standard size, the size of the vibrating string length, or VSL, is measured between the nut and the bridge, and that's the actual amount of string that we can actually play on the fretboard. That's the range that we actually count. And so most 28-inch, 27-inch VSLs will have about 14, 15, 16 frets. And every single fret has a number. We start from the nut there on the left side, and then we count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have the 6.5 fret, which is unusual in the musical world. But down the road here, when we talk about modes, we'll understand why we have this odd little 6.5 fret while none of the other ones are halves. Also, you might have a 1.5 fret that fits right in between the first and second fret. I didn't put that on here because it's not quite a standard edition yet. It's becoming more popular, but it's not something that everybody has just yet. But just about everybody has that 6.5 fret to be able to play a lot of modern music. Some of you might not even have the 6.5 fret, and you might have a true traditional dulcimer that just has the 6th fret and 7th fret, which I love that those still exist. But there are a lot of tunes that you will not be able to play that are popular in DAD tuning. Without that, the 6.5 fret, usually not having it, works better in DAA. All right, and let's take a look at page 3. For reading tablature. There's a representation of the dulcimer and the numbers associated with the frets. For a good portion of this, we're not going to be going above fret number 7. Everything's going to be taking place from the open position to the 7th fret, which is the octave of the instrument. So that really is the halfway point between the first octave and the second octave. And we're just going to stay in the first octave pretty much. So when you look at tablature, there are a series of numbers, and those numbers are going to be on different lines. So if you just look at the dulcimer right now, and then look below the dulcimer at that fretboard representation, that top line corresponds with the bass string, that middle line corresponds with the middle string, and the bottom line corresponds with the melody string. So tablature shows up just like you're looking down at your dulcimer and seeing where those things go. So if you see a number on that top string, that you're going to play that fret on the bass string. And if you see that number on the middle string, you're going to play that fret on the middle string. And if you see that number on the melody on the bottom line, then you're going to play it on the melody string at whatever fret that number is. If you see a 0, it means don't touch the fret at all. You're going to play open position. So I'll move down here, and at this time, if you haven't already done so, go ahead and tune to DAA. And once again, we're going to be taking this pitch down. Now I'm going to go ahead and do this. And here's what you want to be doing when you're tuning. You want to pluck it, and then you want to move the tuner so that that pitch goes down. You can hear it start to go down there. You really, really want to be able to hear the sound of the pitch going down. Some people will pluck the string, then stop the string, and then they'll move that tuner. The problem with that, A, is that you can't hear how far down you're going. You have to guess until you hit that string again. The other thing is that the string is, and this is a topic that needs to be talked about. A lot of people don't like retuning because they probably broke a string at some point, and it was one of the more traumatic experiences that a person can have. I still make tuning face when I tune because I've had many strings pop and go flying towards my face. You never truly get used to that, but it's just a fact of the biz. You know, it's something you got to deal with. But you have more of a chance of breaking your string if it's not actually vibrating when you change the length of it by using the tuner. If it's actually sounding, it's probably not going to break, whereas if it's not sounding, it's more likely to break. That's just a question of physics, or an artifact of physics, basically. So you want to be able to hear it. And what you can also do at this point is you can play also the middle string and wait for those strings to get nice and close. Now I'm going to show you a really, really cool trick, and this is helpful if you don't want to use a tuner and you want to tune by yourself. Every single note that we play has a frequency it lives at, and it's a vibration. That frequency is reading how many times that sound wave is vibrating. Okay. What happens is when you get close to the pitch, you're going to hear motion. You're going to hear these beats. They're going to speed up, slow down as you get closer to a pitch and then further away from the pitch. I want you to listen to that now so you know what it sounds like, and this will help you get things better in tune. Okay, so I'm going to be a little out of tune here. Can you hear that kind of going on there? Now I'm going to take the pitch of the string down, and I want you to listen to that background wave. It's going to slow down the closer I get these two strings to be the same pitch. Hear that shininess? Wah, 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 wah. Hear how slow it is now? Ah, ah, ah. Very slow now. When you basically don't hear that movement anymore, your strings are now in tune together. Now I'm going to go back out of tune. Listen to that beat speed up. And now I'm going to take it back down again. Listen to those beats slow down. And now we're back in tune. All right. Let's go ahead and take a look at that bottom line. We're in DAA. This is not a scale. We're just going to move up through all of our frets. Go ahead and take your finger and put it down on the melody string just to the left of that first fret. I'm going to stop sharing now, and we're going to touch every fret as we go up. So once again, this is not a scale. This is just us playing everything. And let me go ahead and fix my camera here by going in here, taking this out, and then putting it back in so that I'm not all frozen there. And come on back to Zoom. Okay, dokie. Okay, so just to the left of that first fret, go ahead and put your finger down there. And we're not going to go ahead and play across all the strings. We're just going to play on that first string. So you want to take your pick, and we talked about doing this. I want you to hold the pick out in front of you like this. Hold it between your thumb and your forefinger. And you really shouldn't put any more fingers on there. I know sometimes we want to get a better grip on that thing. But that's going to affect your sound. Because if you use a thumb and two fingers like this, every time you hit the string, your index finger and your middle finger are going to bend on either side of your thumb. Your thumb becomes a fulcrum, and that means that you're going to be bending the pick. When you bend the pick, you're actually stiffening it up. And you're also putting pressure on the muscles in your arm. Go ahead and put your index finger and your thumb on the pick. Have a nice light grip, and I want you to go ahead and feel your arm. Feel all up and down your arm and feel how nice and relaxed you are. Now, I want you to go ahead and squeeze that pick like, oh, it's not going back in the sound hole. Nope, nope, nope. I'm going to grab onto it. Now feel your arm again. Wow. Feel all that tension in there? You may not lose that pick, but you are also creating so much tension in your arm that you're not going to be able to have a nice, smooth, and easygoing strum. So the key to having a really flowing rhythm is to go light with your grip on the pick. And the pick will do its magic just by you moving it back and forth. With the point down, unless you've got a pointless pick, which they do exist, they're round picks, they're kind of fun. With the pick pointing down, we want to get that right here, right above the lower tone holes on your instrument. Now this area down here close to the bridge is called the strum hollow, and certainly you can strum in there. But the closer you get to the bridge, the more brittle and more nasal your sound becomes. Watch as I strum from this point closer to the bridge and listen to this, the quality of the sound. Okay, now I'm going to bring it back to the area where I started. So it sounds a lot richer, a lot warmer right there by the tone holes. And so that's called the sweet spot, and every mountain dulcimer's got one. You're playing over the fretboard as opposed to playing in the strum hollow. There are times when you want to play in the strum hollow for sure, but if you want a really sweet, sweet sound from your dulcimer, you want to play over the frets, right near those lower tone holes. I'm just going to go directly across the strings. Let me move over just a little bit so you can see the wrist action. Just go ahead and do that a little bit. Yeah? Did somebody have a question? Okay. Go ahead and strum out.
You seem to be holding the fretboard with a couple of your fingers.
Uh-huh.
You're holding onto. Is that how you play?
Yes. I'm not so much holding onto it, but I'm letting those fingers rest down there as opposed to balling my hand up around the pick and just kind of floating up like this. If you look at the inset where I'm actually looking at the camera, you can see a little bit better the difference between having my fist balled up around the pick or letting those other fingers drop down there. They kind of do bump up against the side of the fretboard, but I move my hands around a lot and they kind of go with me. This is something that I do. It's not something I learned to do. It's something I did by necessity at some point in time. And that's why I hesitate to tell people, you should do this, because it's one more thing that you have to think about. The problem with mountain dulcimers is, you know, with a guitar, we can hold a guitar to our body, or an ukulele or a mandolin. We can put our forearm over the instrument and we can let gravity do its thing. Put our hand down, bring it up, and it's natural. With a mountain dulcimer, we've got our elbow floating out in space and we're hovering above the instrument, and the only way that we're touching the instrument is using the pick. Well, you know, anybody who's ever tried to hold their hands out like this for a long period of time and try to be consistent, you know, your hands are going to drop a little, they're going to go a little bit higher. Same thing is happening here. So if you get deep into the strings, or you miss the strings altogether because you're floating like this, this technique is called posting. And basically, it's a way of sort of remaining connected to the dulcimer. You're not locked in stone there, but your fingers are there. And if you get, you know, if they're like cat's whiskers, you know, they let you know. If they start to bend, you know, maybe you're getting a little too deep, you know. And if they start to lift off from the fretboard, then you know you're getting a little bit too high. These fingers serve as a point of reference to let you know where you are at all times. And if you're like me and you like to boogie when you're playing and you're moving around, when that dulcimer is moving around but your arm is floating up here, chances are if you boogie, suddenly you're out of alignment. But if your fingers are down there and your dulcimer moves, your hand's going to go with it. So that's one of the reasons why I do that. And if you find that your strum is inconsistent, or you're just tired of holding your arm out in the air like that, try not to think about it, but just using your thumb and forefinger, just let those fingers rest on the soundboard and give that a shot. So I'm not consciously trying to hook them. I'm basically just not balling my fingers into a fist. I don't want you to have to think about it at all, because we all have enough things to think about when we're trying to do this juggling act, playing the instrument. All right, now with the left hand, we're going to go ahead and put our finger down. Once again, I have the 1.5 fret. So your fretboard probably looks like this if you don't have the 1.5 fret. So I'm going to skip over that fret, but we're going to start from 1. move to 2, then go to 3, then 4, then 5, then 6, then 6.5, and then finally 7. And we'll just pluck just the melody string. Let me go ahead and do this. And let's go ahead and play that together. Play it with me. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then let's go back down again. Okay, let's do that one more time, and let's call out the names or the numbers of the frets. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6.5, and 7. And do the same thing going backwards. 7, 6.5, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. A couple of landmark frets to look for, so you don't have to count up from the nut every single time. A couple of landmark frets would be, first of all, I'm going to cover up the 1.5 fret, so this is a lot easier to look at. You'll notice that we've got these wide spaces in between the frets, and then we've got narrow spaces in between the frets. Won't go too deep into it right now, but those wide spaces are whole steps, and those narrow spaces are half steps. So you should probably have this wide space, narrow space right there, if you don't have the 1.5 fret. That narrow space is your 3rd fret. So you can instantly look down and go, my first small space is number 3. And a lot of times there's going to be a positioning dot right there to sort of remind you of that's 3 right there. What that means is if you're looking at a piece of tablature and maybe that number is 4, you don't have to count all the way up from the nut and go 1, 2, 3, 4. You can just count up from the 3rd fret and go, oh, 4 is 1 more up this way. Or in the case of a 2 on the tablature, you'll go, oh, well, 2 is right under the 3rd fret. So sticking in your mind that that 3rd fret is right there will help you a lot. Same thing with this 7th fret up here. Now, we have gone from wide space, 1st fret, wide space for the 2nd fret, narrow space for the 3rd fret. The next time you run into these narrow spaces, you're going to have 3 of them if you've got the 6.5 fret. There's 3 of these little guys all hanging out together, and that's a really important section of the mountain dulcimer. That's where a lot of the magic happens. So just remember that from low to high, we've got 6, 6.5, and 7. So you can also look at your tablature and go, oh, I've got a 5, so I'm going to go 1 below this short fret to get to 5, and then back up to 6. Or if you've got an 8, for example, you know you can go 1 up from the uppermost of that little trilogy of frets to 8 up here. And remember, your 6.5 fret is always going to be the middle of that little trilogy of frets, just for quick reference when you're going through the tablature. Any questions on the fret numbers or anything involved with the strumming aspect of things? There you go. Catherine, go ahead. My unmute button isn't working.
Okay. You've been strumming out in demonstrating this, but I notice in your posts that often you're strumming in across a chord, which gives a richness because you're starting with the bass note rather than the melody.
Yeah. As you begin to play more and find out the things that you like, but specifically in doing a lot of strumming, and we'll cover this, we'll be going back and forth. Typically, when I'm coming in like that, the last note I'm hitting is the melody string, and that puts the melody on the top. It keeps it resonating a bit longer, and it draws more attention to it. And when I'm going out, maybe I'm not focusing on that nearly as much, but it's just something I've developed over the years, is to in strum if I want to really accent the melody. Let's see. Okay. Let's go up and let me first of all move this to 4. Okay. Now this is going to be in your resource material. This is page 4. I'm going to share the screen here via AirPlay once again. And now I'm going to show you an actual scale. I'm going to show you the D major scale. The mountain dulcimer can play in a lot of different keys, but when we're tuned DAA or DAD, our home key is D. We can play in G, we can play in A, we can play in B minor, E minor, F sharp minor, but our home key is D. So this is the D major scale, and this is important to know. So there we've got 3 is the first note. This is where the scale lives on the mountain dulcimer in DAA, and we're not using the 6.5 fret at all. We're going from the 3rd fret up to the 10th fret, and that's going to give us the D major scale. And that's going to sound like this. There are 7 notes in the D major scale. You don't have to know these right now. D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, and C sharp. Those are 7 notes. We do repeat the note that we started with, D, and we play it an octave higher as the 8th note. Octo is Latin for the word 8. So we do play 8 notes total, but there are 7 different notes. And then we start and end our scales with the same note, but the last note is an octave higher than the first note. This note is the same as this note. The note is the same, but the pitch, how high or how low it is the pitch. These are the same note, but they are different pitches. Otherwise, we'd only have 7 notes to work with in any given scale. So there's a lot of stuff going on here. Now, I also have an 8.5 fret, which is cousin to the 1.5 fret. So when you're looking at the fretboard when I'm playing that, I'm going to be skipping over that fret just to make sure that there isn't any confusion there. Let's go ahead and play the D major scale. And we're going to go ahead and play across all the strings to bring that glorious drone into the picture. So we're starting at the 3rd fret. We are not using the 6.5 fret. We're going to go all the way to the 10th fret, and the 10th fret is a small fret. I'm going to cover up my 8.5 there. The 10th fret is a small fret, and it's the next small fret you'll encounter after our little trilogy of small frets. So remember, our first small fret, our first small fret is the 3rd. Then our next encounter is this little trilogy, 6, 6.5, 7. And then we'll have the 10th fret, and that's where we're going to end our scale. So just focus on that, eyeball it, know that's where you're going to end up. And let's go ahead and play the D major scale in DAA, starting at the 3rd fret. Go across all the strings and bring that drone in. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. You'll notice I used my thumb that time. That's my preferred melody finger to use. But you can use your thumb, you can use your index finger, you can use a noter, whatever you like. Let's go ahead and do that again. D major scale starting from the 3rd fret. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. Now we're going to bring it back down again, and in the next instance here, you can see the tablature is written out for you to go up and come back down, so you don't have to worry about trying to memorize it right now. Let's go ahead and play up to the 10th fret. We're going to repeat that top note and then come back down again. These are all quarter notes up here, so when I count 1, 2, 3, 4, each one of those beats, we will play it for that long. So at the end of the 2nd measure, we'll hit 10. At the beginning of that 3rd measure, we'll play 10 again and then come on back down again. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Coming back down. All right. That is going to bring us in now to the rhythm part of things.